When we think of power, we usually picture the obvious stuff. Boardrooms, palaces, government buildings. But what if the real rules of power are invisible? A kind of hidden, often pretty ruthless code that's shaping our lives every single day. Well, that's the fascinating and kind of dangerous world we're about to dive into. So these rules, they create this sort of game that's constantly being played all around us. At the office, between friends, even in our own families. And believe me, it's a game with incredibly high stakes. And here's the thing. The part that's a little unsettling, you can't just opt out. Whether you decide to play this game or not, you gotta understand that the people around you are playing. Learning these rules isn't about becoming some kind of evil mastermind. It's about learning how to defend yourself and just see the world for what it really is.
Okay, so where do we even begin? Well, we start with the first and maybe the most critical law of all. Never outshine the master. This is all about how you manage the people above you. And ignoring this one? Yeah, that can be fatal.
So let me tell you a story, a real cautionary tale from 17th century France. You have the finance minister, Nicolas Fouché, and he wants to impress King Louis XIV. So what does he do? He throws the most incredible, lavish party you can possibly imagine, a total spectacle of his own wealth and influence. But, and this is the crucial part, he made one fatal mistake. The party was, well, it was too good. The king felt upstaged, insecure, completely overshadowed. And the very next day, Fouché was arrested on phony charges and spent the rest of his life in prison. His own brilliance became his downfall. So Fawcett's story, it really brings us to our first big idea here, mastering your image. See, a lot of these laws aren't about who you actually are deep down. They're about how other people see you. Because in this game, what people think they see, well, that becomes the reality. And that's exactly why your reputation is your single greatest asset. I mean, just think about a guy like Cesare Borgia. His reputation for being absolutely ruthless was so terrifying it basically acted like a weapon. It intimidated his enemies and kept his rivals in line before a single sword was ever drawn. It was his shield and his sword all at once. And building this image, man, it's a real art form. It's about getting attention, making your biggest wins look like they were no big deal, and guarding that reputation like your life depends on it. It means you gotta be willing to reinvent yourself or even just disappear for a while to make people respect you more. In the end, it's all about you controlling the story. A perfect example of this, just look at the classic rivalry between Edison and Tesla. Thomas Edison was an absolute master showman. He put on these huge public demonstrations, made these big, bold claims. Nikola Tesla, on the other hand, was probably the more brilliant scientist, right? But he just couldn't capture the public's imagination in the same way. So what happened? Edison became a legend, and Tesla died broke and forgotten. It's a tough lesson that in this game, a well-managed perception will beat raw talent almost every time. Okay, so let's move on to our second pillar. And this is where things get even more cynical. It's all about outwitting friends and foes. This is where you really start to see that in the game of power, cold, hard strategy often crushes the warmth of loyalty. Okay, let's look at two emperors, a tale of two completely different approaches. First, you have Michael III in Byzantium. He promotes his buddy Basil, a guy who started as a stable hand, all the way up to co-emperor. But all that power just fueled Basil's envy, and he ended up murdering the very man who gave him everything. Now contrast that with Emperor Taisu in China. He invites all his rival generals to a big dinner. Instead of killing them, he offers them a sweet deal, a life of luxury and retirement. He turned his enemies into grateful supporters, and in doing so, he ended centuries of coups and started a dynasty that lasted 300 years. So what's the lesson here? Well, it's a pretty harsh one. A friend can get jealous, become unpredictable, and turn on you. But a former enemy, someone who has something to prove to you, they can actually be far more reliable. It's a chilling thought, but in the world of power, it's all about strategy. All right, this brings us to what you might call the master level of power, controlling the game board itself. This isn't about just reacting to things as they happen. Nope, this is about shaping the whole environment so that everybody else is forced to react to you. And a huge tactic here is to hide what you're really up to. Think about it. If people don't know what your actual goal is, they can't possibly prepare a defense against it. And there was maybe no greater master of this than a guy named Otto von Bismarck. Okay, so Bismarck's big goal was to unify Germany under Prussia's rule. And to do that, he had to take down Austria. But he knew his army wasn't ready. So what did he do? He put up a massive smokescreen. He went around publicly praising Austria, saying how much he hated war, all while secretly building one of the most powerful armies in Europe. Then, when the moment was just right, he dropped the act and completely crushed an Austria that had no idea what was coming. He won because nobody saw his true intentions.
Now, another really powerful way to control the whole game is to control the options. This is about giving people what looks like a choice when in reality, every single path leads right back to what you wanted in the first place.
And, oh man, Ivan the Terrible was an absolute master of this. He was facing this rebellion from his nobles, so he did something totally unexpected. He just quit. He abdicated the throne and walked away from Moscow. Of course, chaos immediately erupted. The people were terrified of being ruled by these greedy, warring nobles, so they were faced with a choice that Ivan himself had created: total anarchy or his absolute rule. Naturally, they begged him to come back, giving him the total, unchecked power he wanted all along. He didn't force them, he made them choose it.
So, after hearing all these stories of manipulation and, let's be honest, pretty ruthless strategy, you're probably asking yourself, is this book just a guide on how to be evil? But the final and maybe the most important concept here is that these laws are just a tool. They are amoral. They're not good or bad.
Well, the way to think about it is like this. These laws are like a hammer, right? You can use a hammer to build a beautiful house, or you can use it to smash everything to pieces. The hammer itself doesn't care. It has no morality. The whole point isn't to tell you whether to be good or bad. It's simply to pull back the curtain and show you the mechanics of how power actually works, for better or for worse. What you do with that information, well, that's up to you. And that really brings us to the final, most important point. The real question isn't whether you're going to play this game of power, because you don't get a choice. The game is always being played around you. The real question, the one you have to ask yourself, is how are you going to respond when other people start playing? And that's the question this whole thing leaves us with.